This is your 2-minute warning. 2 minutes till liftoff. I think I already said a 2-minute warning, but here's another 2-minute warning, because I need at least a minute.
I want to know if the milk is slobbery or dry.
Very slobbery. Very slobbery. I don't recommend it. All right. If there's anyone in the hallway, well, they're missing out. Laura, I think I already pushed go live. No, don't end it. I think you might need to switch it to the view so they're seeing me. Friends online, I hope you can see me, and if not, maybe eventually you will. Man, we need our tech people. Well, thank you all for joining me this afternoon. I promise we'll be out before the Super Bowl. I did whittle down my pictures to just a few. And I will, we spent 10 days traveling, and so I could talk for at least 20 days about the trip. So I will try to get us out of here by noon. So I'll skip through some parts really fast, and if you want to hear more, then let's have coffee sometime, and we could do that. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview, point out some of the highlights from my trip to the Holy Land. And so I've entitled this presentation, Tattoos, Camel Kisses, and the Footsteps of Jesus. Because indeed, that's that's what I did. All of those things. That camel's name is Sammy. Sammy kisses travelers. For $1, you can get a kiss from Sammy. So, you know, when in Jericho, as they say. You can go ahead and fast forward, Laura. So this is the group that I traveled with. We were a group of 100 women from all over the United States, all different denominations. That's us in front of sort of the big overlook in Jerusalem. Go ahead, Laura. This is the group that I spent most of my time with. So there was 100 of us split among 3 buses. This is the blue bus. There were about 30 of us on the blue bus. So we did everything together. And they really became my support and my everything during our 10 days together. This is our leader, the Reverend Dr. Jamie Clark Souls. As some of you heard me mention, Jamie, I've known Jamie since I was, I think, 5 or 6. She was a candidate for ordination. My dad was her sponsoring pastor for ordination when she was a student at Yale, and now she is a professor at Perkins School of Theology, and a brilliant professor. And so it was really a joy to connect with her as an adult. You can see we were in 2 different climates, it appears. Jamie remembered I grew up in New England, so I'd be okay. Go ahead, Laura. So there are many stories used to start this presentation, but I will choose to start with the story of my new tattoo. My only tattoo, probably will always be my only tattoo. I've never been someone who had tattoos or particularly wanted one. I could never think of anything I wanted on my body that long, and I'm quite terrified of needles. However, early on in the trip, Melissa, who's in that photo there, told us about this tattoo shop. She was planning to get a tattoo and invited anyone in the group who wanted to accompany her. And what makes this place special is they have been tattooing pilgrims. That's what they call folks who are traveling to the Holy Land. They've been tattooing pilgrims since 1300. The man in the middle, his name is Wasim. He is the 27th generation of his family to be tattooing. They came from Egypt in 1300 and settled there. And so, you know, if you're gonna get a tattoo, you might as well get one from its shop that's been around since 1300. They also still use some of the original stamps. So they stamp it on your skin first and then trace it. You can go to the next slide, Laura. So that's the stamp. Who have also experienced that. The symbol that I got here is the Jerusalem cross, and it's a symbol that you'll see throughout the Holy Land that marks the spots of the pilgrimage. And there's different interpretations. There's the big cross that's Jesus, and the 4 crosses that are the 4 corners of the earth. It also could be the sites of, you know, the crucifixion, his hands and his feet. There's a lot of different meanings to that. For me, I chose this symbol for a couple of reasons. One, because it was the least intricate and so would be the least amount of needles. And it actually wasn't so bad, I will say. And I also chose it because for me it's a reminder, a permanent reminder of the lack of black and white in our world. Let me explain that a little bit. That's been sort of a theme of my life and ministry and faith walk for so long. But particularly on this trip, it was our first full day. We were traveling along and we were in a small bus accident. Everyone was fine. There was just, our bus was cracked a little bit in the back. The car that hit us was a little less fine, but everyone walked away. But because the accident occurred in Bethlehem, which is in Palestine, we'll get to all of that geography later, and our driver is an Israeli citizen driving in Palestine, we learned that his insurance would not protect him. That the Israeli government says that's a bad place, you shouldn't go there, so no one will cover you. Now, fortunately, we were with a big tour company. The big tour company has lots of money and connections based in the US, so our driver was fine, he would be fine. But it got me to thinking, what are we doing here? What are we doing here as US citizens who say, all right, driver, now we didn't do it quite like this, but it felt like we were saying, okay, risk yourself, risk your well-being, risk your driving record and what have you, to drive us across this border that you're not supposed to, so that we can see these sights and take lots of fun pictures. And I wrote in my journal that night, asking myself what it was to be a pilgrim. And where I'm from, in New England, we talk about pilgrims a lot. And we know being a pilgrim is not a black and white thing. The pilgrims, yes, many of us here may be descendants of pilgrims. They brought so much here that we now benefit from, and they also brought disease and corruption and genocide and all of those awful things. So it's not so black and white. And I said, what if being a pilgrim is not such a good thing after all? So this is a theme that followed throughout the trip, and like I said, has been around my life, and I'm sure many of you for a long time. And so this symbol helps to remind me of that. If ever I begin to think there is a clear answer, I'm just reminded that no, there's not. So speaking of not so black and white, Laura, you can go ahead and advance to the next one. This was the first real sight that I saw in the Holy Land. And it shocked me. This is the border wall between Bethlehem and Israel. And I was shocked. I knew that there was a this kind of trip. I thought I was here to take pictures with camels, not to see such walls. So you can go ahead and fast forward another one, Laura. You can see on the wall there's all sorts of different artwork and things, which is very similar to the US-Mexico border wall. You can keep going ahead, Laura. Just some really fascinating artwork done by some by particular artists, some just by passers-by. So our purpose for getting to that point of the wall was to visit the walled off hotel. And this is a hotel that opened in 2017 in partnership with the artist Banksy. For those of you who might not know, Banksy is a guerrilla street artist who travels all over the world. Their identity is unknown. There's some suspicions, but no one knows who Banksy is except for a very few people. And Banksy will paint things on walls and on different places that speak to the political and social situations of various areas. And so the owner of the manager of this hotel partnered with Banksy. Banksy came in decorated the whole place undercover. When Banksy left, they had 24 hours where they totally flipped the facade of the hotel and opened it up. And it's called the Walled Off Hotel because it's right up against that wall there. And they claim that they are the world's best hotel with the world's worst view, because your view is that wall. You can go ahead to the next one, Laura. So this is some of the artwork. This is some of Banksy's original art that they created to hang inside the Walled Off Hotel. You can go to the next one. And this is all inside the lobby there. You can go to the next one. This is a famous one, and we actually saw the original when we were driving around. This is a recreation, and you can see that he's not throwing a grenade or what you might think, but a bouquet of flowers. You can switch ahead to the next. You can't quite tell from the picture. You can see that that is supposed to be a representation of Jesus, and right in the middle of his head is a laser pointer. And so you can see the commentary on what the wall is and means. You can go to the next one there. This was one of my favorites. Obviously, we were there at Christmas time. I think this is out year-round. Go to the next one, and you can see the more zoomed-out view of that nativity scene and what that is to be in Bethlehem and have that. Go to the next one. So this image hangs in the lobby as well. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see the Mother Mary feeding baby Jesus on the other side of the wall while the guards guard there. And you'll notice the keys hanging all around. The key is a symbol of the Palestinian people. So when Israel was declared to be Israel and the Palestinians were removed from their homes, many of them took their keys because they thought that they would just be away for a short time and would be returning to their homes, when in fact their homes were turned over to now Israeli citizens who then moved right in, and these Palestinians are still living either in refugee camps or what have you now 60, 70 years later. But many still have those keys. So if you visit refugee camps in Palestine, you'll see keys everywhere as a symbol of that hope of returning to their homes someday. Also in the hotel, there are, they feature artwork from other Palestinian artists. This was just a couple that I found really moving. Move the next one. So the watermelon is also a sign of Palestinian liberation. When Palestine was essentially destroyed, it became illegal to fly the Palestinian flag. And so instead, people began painting flags and signs with watermelons on them, because the colors of the watermelon are red, white, black, and green, which are the same colors that are in the Palestinian flag. So when you see the watermelons, right, it's now no longer illegal to fly the flag, but that symbol of the watermelon is still very present throughout Palestine. So as I always say when we're talking about scripture and anything, we need to put everything in context. So here you can see Israel in the orange there. The part that is light blue is what is now Palestine. You can go to the next map. And this shows the progression of what was Palestine in 1947, and then the UN plan to create a homeland for the Jewish people called Israel, and then what was then left of Palestine is still in green. In 1949 to 1967, you can see it shrunk even more. This map is from 2005, but it's essentially more or less the same today. So you can see what the Palestinians had and what they have now. And this is, many of you were alive in 1947. So imagine your family being told, all right, someone else is moving in, it's time to go. thinking you'd be back, and now in 2005, you're still not back. So Israel and Palestine, we could get into a whole geopolitical speech about what exactly it means to the states and what that is. I'm not going to get into that because I don't even fully understand myself, but they are two separate and very different places, but Israel has authority over much of Palestine. There are different zones. There's A, B, and C. Can't remember which is which. One is strictly Israel, one is strictly Palestine, and then there's one that's kind of in the middle. Palestinians live there, but Israel has authority. But they're two very different places, and it's very clear when you are in one versus the other. This is looking out over Jerusalem, which this part of Jerusalem's in Israel. Very modern, posh city. You can go ahead to the next one, Laura. Oh, this is a video. You can just let it play. Of our bus driving through a very narrow street we should not have been on in rougher. It's a lot, there's a lot more poverty in Palestine. Go ahead to the next one. So the map there on the left, not good with left and right. The map there on the left is actually drawn by one of the women who was on the trip with us, of the places we went, and I included the sort of modern day Google map so you could get a view of the places we went. So our trip, as I've mentioned before, more or less followed the chronological path of Jesus' life and ministry and death and resurrection. And so we started in Bethlehem. So go ahead to the next one, Laura. This is me in the shepherd's field. That's where the story begins, where the shepherds heard word from the angel that on this day in the city of David is born a king. Now, here's the thing about traveling in the Holy Land is you say, okay, Sarah, it's a field. How do we know it was the field? There are some places in the Holy Land that we can say with pretty decent certainty due to tradition and historical record and carbon dating and all of that, that this is the place where it happened. There are other places that are probably just a good guess. And for some people, it was really important to think this is the spot where it happened. My personal take was knowing, all right, it might not have been right here in this field, but it was in one of these fields that I can see. And just that alone was enough to still feel all of the wonder and amazement at the story. So that's the field, as they say. And that's the modern area of the field, no longer used for shepherds, but apartment buildings. You can go to the next one. This was a cave where the shepherds would have slept with their sheep at night. And so maybe this was the one, or at least very like it. So like I said, for some people it was really important to know that this was the spot where it happened. So this, you can see I'm kind of crouched touching under a table. It's an altar. You can see sort of the points of a star there. This is the place where Jesus was born. Now, some people think it was the place. Having given birth before, I cannot tell you where the place was where the child was born and then first laid. Nobody knows that. But it was important for some people to touch that place. And after I had this experience, it was kind of rushed and there was a lot going on. And when I was reflecting later with some friends on the trip, I said, I feel the need to say sorry to Mary, because that just feels really invasive. We've taken so much from her about this whole experience of her son. Let's let her have the place. We don't need all these generations of people touching it. So anyway, but this was, you can go to the next slide, Laura. This was the Church of the Nativity. It's now a Greek Orthodox church, as you can tell by all of the gold adornment. And there were mosaics, and it's quite beautiful. But not what you would picture when you think the site where Jesus was born. We're picturing the stable and the cows, but because these sites have been holy for 2,000 years, they have been built up, and cathedrals have been built on top of most of them. So it was sometimes difficult for me to really imagine Jesus being born in this spot when this was over top of it, but beautiful nonetheless. So from Bethlehem, we went north to, well, actually, the story kind of started in Nazareth, so I won't quiz you on that. We went to Nazareth next, and we went to, you can go to the next one, Laura, the Church of the Annunciation, which is where the angel told Mary she would bear Jesus. Go to the next one. So this is the inside of the Church of the Annunciation, and if you see that kind of opening right there in the middle, Laura, you can go to the next one. This is a close-up on that, and this is supposedly the home where Mary's family lived, and the angel came to visit her. One of the things that I loved about this particular site, you can go to the next one, is it's all about Mary at this church, and they had different depictions of Mary from lots of different cultures represented. So if you go to the next one, Laura, I have just a few here. I can't remember what that one is. I think that's Brazil and Ukraine. Go to the next. Well, I'll print a book and we'll get all these up close someday. You can see India, Romania, others, and it was just really fascinating to see how different cultures represent Mary for themselves. There's one more there. And then the next one. So this Mary was absolutely captivating to me. It was very 3D, and this was Mary. Shared a little moment, and I think I mentioned many of the people on my group were from Texas, and so I just, I had this moment. I said, look guys, Mary is from Pennsylvania too. So that was kind of a fun thing that Mary and I shared. So from there, we didn't travel back and forth in this way, but next in the story is where Mary and Elizabeth were together. And so we went to, this was just outside of Jerusalem. We went to that site called Church of the Visitation. And you can see the words out there that say Magnificat, which is where Mary would have recited the Magnificat. You can go to the next one. This church, I said this about almost every place we went, but I really think that this one may have been my favorite. It was a smaller church. It wasn't a grand cathedral like some of the others, but everything in there was about Mary and the other women in the Bible. And so this was the painting, probably the same size as our wall back here on the back wall of the church. And it was just a representation of Mary. We often see sort of I don't know what era painting of, Mary holding the baby Jesus in a very unnatural way, and you think no one's ever held a baby like that. And this one, you can see Mary cuddling Jesus, really having that maternal, just like one of you right now. Oh my gosh. One of yours just snuggled up over there. Really seeing that maternal Mary, not Mary who birthed Jesus into the world, but but Mary, Jesus' mommy. And so, especially by the time we got to this site, we were probably about 8 days into the trip. So those of us who were mommies were sitting there all just weeping over this picture, missing our babies. But the rest of the church, I couldn't get a good picture because it was so tall but so narrow, had the different women of the Bible above each pillar. And there was hardly any men represented, so sorry men, but you got every other cathedral, so we took this one. And especially being on a trip of all women, it was really a very moving place to be and really, really beautiful. This was the statue outside of the cathedral of Mary and Elizabeth, both of whom were pregnant and visiting one another. You go to the next one. And this is sort of the outside area. You can see the statue there, and each of those little plaques is the Magnificat in different languages. And so I love this. As many of you know, the Magnificat is one of my favorite parts of Scripture. It was read at my ordination, and to see it represented across there was very, very moving. All right, so from there, again, that was later in the trip, but we went from Nazareth to Samaria. You can go to the next one, Laura. And this was the site of Jacob's well, which is where Jesus met the Samaritan woman. You remember the Samaritan woman came to the well. She, been accused of adultery and having 5 husbands, all that, blah, blah, blah. And Jesus offered her living water. But we got to actually use the well and drop it down and pick up some water. They said you could drink it, but I've had parasites before, so I wasn't doing that. But it was really neat to see, and again, a cathedral built around it, but to see and touch this well where most certainly Jesus sat at and drank water himself. Before I get to the next spot on the map, when we left Jacob's well, Jacob's well is in Samaria. Samaria is in Palestine. Palestine is not Israel. We had to get to Israel to go to our next spot. We go to the border crossing, and they told us to pull over. They didn't really tell us so much as they pulled us over. And those of you who have traveled internationally know that when you have a U.S. passport, you're in pretty good shape. Our U.S. passports give us a great deal of privilege in the world. I've crossed the U.S.-Mexico border hundreds of times, been stopped here and there, but always get through because I have a U.S. passport. The Israeli army didn't really care about that. And so they stopped us, and our tour guide, her name was Mona. She is a Palestinian Arab Christian. Yes, all of those identities exist in one person, and she's also an Israeli citizen. Complicated history. She jumps off the bus, and she's about this tall, but we quickly became fearful of Mona, because if she turned it on, she was taking on the Israeli army. And she had a lot to lose by taking on the Israeli army. And the Israeli army had their guns trained, one on her and one on the bus. And we waited, and we waited, and we looked, and we saw Mona's arms going like this, and she's on the phone, and the bus drivers are all out. And that gun did not move. That gun was trained right on us. And at one point, one of the Israeli soldiers came on, and if you know that Israeli citizens have a requirement to do a year of service in the military. When they're, I think 18 is their year of service. This soldier couldn't have been more than 18 or 19 years old. And he came on and he said, we're just looking out for your safety, that's all. It should only be a few more minutes. We just want you to be safe. And we said, okay. And he got off the bus, and we're going, that wasn't normal. And Jamie was on the bus, and she said, yeah, I've been here half a dozen times, and this is not normal. And so it was a little scary. And it was scary to witness what it could have been like had we not had U.S. passports, how that might have changed. We had one woman on our bus who survived the regime in Argentina in the 70s. She was extremely triggered by this experience. And at one point someone said, "Oh, look, they're laughing." And Anai said, "They were always laughing. They were always laughing." So it was a very real picture of what Palestinians and people all over the world go through on any given day. Again, it's not a black and white issue, friends. And so we were turned away. We did not get to cross into Israel. Now, there are many crossings around the area, so it's not like if you get turned away at one, you're stuck in Palestine forever. But our drivers and our tour guides were so disappointed, and we said, "Well, why? Why did they turn us away?" Well, we didn't know, but the day before, or a couple of days before, a young boy had been killed by the Israeli army, a young Palestinian boy killed by the Israeli army. So, as happens, there were demonstrations on that day, not far from where we had come from at Jacob's Well. And the Israeli army was upset about him. Now, we had nothing to do with the demonstrations. We weren't claiming to be pro-Palestinian, pro-Israel. We were just, doing our pilgrimage thing. But the Israeli army felt that they needed to send a message. And as we said, they told us they wanted us to be safe, but they sent us back to the unsafe people. So we had to take a very roundabout way, which was very roundabout, and we did eventually get through a crossing, but even at that crossing, our passports were all checked, which is not typical. Usually for a tour bus, they just wave you through. But we did finally make it through to the other side with stories to tell. So then we ended up, after that adventure, in Tiberias, which is on the Sea of Galilee. You can go ahead to the next one, Laura. And I think of the regions we were in, this one was, I think, my favorite. And I think part of that had to do with it was much more open, a lot of nature, not the same type of big cathedrals built over little tiny stars, and it was just really, really beautiful. So you can see that mountain, I can't remember the name of it now. It's not important. I mean, it is important, but Jesus walked on that mountain, just know that. And we got to take a morning boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, which was absolutely breathtaking. And at one point, the driver cut the engine, because Jesus' boat didn't have an engine, and you could just hear the water and know that Jesus was in a boat on these very waters. You can go ahead. You can go to the next one there. I had to recreate Jesus sleeping in the back of the boat, because, again, and on the Sea of Galilee. Oh, I just thought this sign, what? I did, yes, I absolutely calmed the storm after I woke up from my nap. I just thought this sign was funny. As you're getting on the boat to go on the Sea of Galilee, the sign said, "Fishing is prohibited." Think about what Jesus' disciples did as careers. Anyway, you can go to the next one. This was absolutely fascinating. This boat is a 1st century fishing boat. Last 30-ish years. So recently, and when we're talking about Jesus, that's recent. And it was discovered by a couple of fishermen who, I can't remember if they were digging or their truck got stuck or something, and they saw a nail sticking out, and so dug a little bit and saw what they knew at that point was something important. As you can imagine, all over Israel and Palestine, if you dig, you find stuff. There's a lot of history there. So they kept digging, they found what they were certain was something important. And eventually, called in the Antiquities Commission and the archaeologists and all of that. And they discovered this boat, which was quite the discovery. It had been buried in mud for 2,000 years. And just to hear this, we got to watch a video, the story of how they removed it from the mud. Because as you can imagine, the mud is what protected it and kept it safe and whole for all these years. So as soon as it was exposed to the air, it would dry up and crumble, but it takes a while to dig out all the mud, and then they had to lift it out and keep it together without, it was just absolutely fascinating, and just to imagine that this might have been Jesus' boat was kind of fun. Also, I would not take a ride in that boat, but that's just me. That's a little more close up on it. The metal spiky things obviously are not original to the boat. They help keep it together. So this site is at Magdala, where you may guess Mary Magdalene was from. Also in the Sea of Galilee region. These ruins are the site of a first century temple, because we know that Jesus taught and preached around the Sea of Galilee in the first century. We're pretty certain that Jesus would have preached and taught in this temple here. So you can go ahead to the next one, Laura. So this was just discovered, again, dates, since the year 2000. They were digging to build some new construction, and lo and behold, here's a first century temple. Keep going. So the church that has been built on this site is built in homage to all of the women of the Bible, especially Mary Magdalene, but all the others as well. So there's a screen, and another just really wonderful place to feel that presence of Christ and his ministry. Go to the next one. And then after that, we were able to go down to the beach where after Jesus was resurrected and he and the disciples had breakfast on the beach, they cooked fish over a fire, we got to go down to that beach and walk into the Sea of Galilee. And I don't know, maybe it was the Baptist in me, but just being in the water was magical. Feeling that very water that Jesus had walked in and on was quite powerful. There's some of my sisters on the trip in the water, splashing around. Those Texans were cold, though. This is from Capernaum, the town where Jesus lived. This was one of the most special places, I think, because while the other ones we're pretty sure Jesus was in these places, or we know that he was in this general area, this is the town where he lived. So we know he was in and out of these homes and shops, all the time. You can go to the next one, Laura. So this is some of the foundations of the homes from the time when Jesus lived there. That may be Jesus's house right there. We don't know exactly. That structure in the middle is the base of Peter's mother-in-law's home, which was one of the very first house churches that we know of in the Book of Acts. And so that was a kind of a fun you know, that's what happened right there. I showed this one in church a few weeks ago, where you can see the darker stones underneath. That is the original temple in Capernaum, which would have been Jesus' home church. That's Jesus' RBC right there. The lighter colored stones on top of it are from a later temple that was built in the 4th century. But, you know, someday someone might look at this foundation and say, look, that was RBC's original foundation. Well, I guess it wouldn't be original, it's the second one, but still. And this is just the Sea of Galilee, which is just beautiful. You all should go sometime. We'll make a trip. So from the Sea of Galilee, which is that little sea at the top, we traveled down, down, down. That line down the middle, that's the Jordan River. And we ended up at the site of Jesus' baptism in the Jordan River. So this is our whole group gathered. Many of the women on the trip were Methodist, not everyone, but that was sort of the majority. But like I said, we had a lot of denominations represented. So some of those folks did a remembrance of their baptism by just taking some water from the Jordan and crossing it on their heads. Go to the next one. But Baptists don't play around. We're not just sprinkling water on our head, we're getting in. And so it was the privilege of a lifetime to be able to perform baptisms in the Jordan River. Those 3 of us there are 3 Baptist clergy women. Some of you might recognize Pat Hernandez. She was the only other American Baptist on the trip with me. Pat is the Associate General Secretary for Women in Ministry for our denomination. So we got to baptize. Now, I want you also to look at that water behind us. That's water. It's very murky. You could not see to the bottom. So that was a real step of faith, to walk into that water and not know what my feet was touching. So you can go ahead to the next one. The water was also very cold, especially for the Texans. And the woman there who I'm baptizing was my roommate on the trip, Mara, and so it was really an honor to baptize her in those waters there. And that was the whole group of those who decided to be baptized by full immersion in that murky, murky water, a real step of faith. So from that site of Jesus' baptism at the Jordan River, we then went down to the Dead Sea, which is the saltiest sea in the world. You float, you really do. You just kind of fall back. There was a video of me falling back, but I fell on a rock, so I didn't include that here, so you don't need to see me yelling about falling on a rock. But you do just kind of bounce around in the sea. I think Karen had asked if people were baptized there. And we didn't baptize people there, but someone told a story of someone they knew who had been on a trip where folks were baptized. They had trouble getting them under because the water is so buoyant. So you couldn't really fully get immersed there. So not the best place to baptize by immersion, but it was just a fun place to float around for a bit. From the Dead Sea, we went back towards Jerusalem, which is where we remained for the rest of the trip. But first we were in Bethany, which is just sort of outside there. You can go to the next one. And who lived in Bethany? Mary and Martha and Lazarus. So we got to see the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. There's a cathedral there. And this was us descending into Lazarus's tomb, which was very small. You could see it's tough to get into. But again, they thought you'd be dead going in there. So, you know, you can go to the next one, Laura. This is us inside the tomb. Again, not very roomy. I could see why they didn't think he would come out again. But it was kind of, it was fascinating and also kind of creepy to be in there, to be honest with you. So after Bethany, we settled back into Jerusalem. Go to the next one. This is just one of the streets in the old city of Jerusalem. There's part of the city in the middle that's the old city, which is, as you can imagine, where all of the historical sites are, and the tourist shops and that. This is the steps of the temple. These are the teaching steps where Jesus taught when he was in Jerusalem. And we got to hear a lecture there by Jamie, which was just neat to hear a lecture, especially a lecture given by a woman in this place where Jesus was. This is outside of the temple, which is where the stalls would have been where Jesus flipped the tables of the moneymakers. So you could see flipping a table there. so to speak. This here is the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. It's a very sacred site for the Jewish people, the remaining wall of the temple that was destroyed. It's a place where people go to pray and often leave little slips write their prayers on little slips and leave them there. It was also interesting to me because it is a Jewish site. The men and women have to be separated. So you see where that line of white umbrellas is. On the other side is where the men go to pray. On our side is where the women were praying. And women are not allowed to read from the Torah there, which is the Jewish holy book. And while we were there, we were stopped by a group of young women who were gathering information and sharing information of a group called Women at the Wall, which is a group of women who are hoping to secure the right to read from the Torah at the wall. And it was funny because they kind of approached us a little hesitantly as they were approaching different groups, and they said, "Have you heard of us?" We said, "No." They started explaining, and we go, "Oh, we're a group of clergy women. Come on over, this is your crowd, tell us your story." So it was really eye-opening to hear that perspective and that story. Again, it's not black and white. It's not black and white. This is the healing pools of Bethesda, where Jesus healed folks. We had a wonderful prayer service of healing there. All of those little rocks and stuff would be where the pools were, where they healed. This is the mural of the cathedral in the Garden of Gethsemane. So you can see some of the parts inside. There's two little reindeer on top. I don't know what those mean. I just noticed that when I was creating this. If someone knows why there's reindeer on top, I'd be happy to know. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane. These are the olive trees. I learned that olive trees can be very, 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 very old. So some of these olive trees were the ones that were there when Jesus was in the garden. And I just wanted to ask them questions. If there ever was a time you wanted trees to be able to talk, what was it like for them? What did they see? What did they hear? They didn't answer me though, so I just have to wonder. And they're just cool-looking trees too. This particular tree is where tradition says that the disciples fell asleep when they were supposed to be keeping watch with Jesus. So it's kind of fenced off because too many people were trying to take a piece of the tree with them. I don't think it said peace when Jesus was there, but it was a nice picture anyway. This is supposedly the rock where Jesus, the statue is Jesus kind of weeping on the rock where Jesus wept and said, "Let this cup pass from my hands." This is inside the old city of Jerusalem. So on our final full day, we walked through the city among the stations of the cross. So each of the different sites of the day of Good Friday. That's just another street in the old city. So in each of the sites of the Stations of the Cross, there is, you can guess, a little cathedral. And I won't show you pictures of every single one, but this one, it's hard to tell in this picture, but that mosaic on the top is a crown of Also in that area, I just loved this statue of Mary with the sword in her heart and just the pain on her face, which we can imagine or can't imagine. And the whole ceiling was covered in just these beautiful mosaics. And this one is just one of Jesus being nailed on the cross. If you go to the next one, Lara, we were kind of captivated by this image of the guy just hammering in the nails. And he kind of has this expression of, oh, another day in the office. And wondering, putting ourselves in his shoes and wondering, was it another day at the office for him? Or was he so desensitized to the work that the Romans made him do that he just didn't feel emotion anymore? What was he feeling? Again, it's not black and white. He may have been very much on board with his job, or he may have been forced into that. We don't know. This is the stone where Jesus was laid after his death on the cross. This is another mosaic above the stone there, where you can see the images of him being removed from the cross, laid on that stone, and then wrapped and placed in the tomb. This is a second site that claims to be where Jesus was crucified. And history has pretty much proven that this wasn't actually it, but they still like to say it. But they claim that this would be the mountain where Jesus was crucified. And I just found it fascinating that it was next to a bus station. And it was kind of that beautiful juxtaposition of the old and the new, and also all that bus stations can sometimes represent in people's lives. Bus stations are not usually the happiest or most pleasant of places, and to see that next to the spot where maybe Jesus was crucified was very poetic. This has been disproven to be the actual tomb, but in my professional opinion, provided a more realistic view of what the tomb actually looked like in that time. And this was the inside, and you could see there's room for many in here. But when we read the scriptures, we are told that it was a brand new tomb, which would have been important to those witnessing the resurrection, so they would know that it was Jesus who rose and not. I just did that. And not, something else coming out. So I had the great honor of celebrating communion and serving over communion with our entire group in this garden. Not the Garden of Gethsemane, but the garden tomb, which is the second site. And it was really, we can go back to the so it was really a powerful moment for me to be able to serve communion. We had been denied serving communion at a previous location because we were women, and it was a Roman Catholic site, and the Roman Catholics won't let women preside. So it was especially important for us as women clergy, serving other women to be there, and really talk about expanding the table. There it is right there. So you can go ahead to the next one, Laura. So this is my last pictures for you, is my last example of not black and white, and it's a tale of two dinners. The first picture on the family who hosted us and learn about their life as Palestinians. And I went right for it because I thought, how often am I going to be around a table in a Palestinian's home? I'm asking all the questions. And they were very kind to answer me. And the patriarch of the family remembers, the first, all the different waves of different types of ruling and such, and remembers a time where he could cross the border freely and go into other parts of Israel. Now that is not so. He now can cross. When you reach a certain age, you're able to cross, because I guess older people aren't a threat. I don't know what the reason behind that is. But his wife cannot go, his children cannot go. Sometimes special permissions are granted, but not always, and it's a long, lengthy process. And so I asked him, what was his solution to peace? What did he see as the answer? And he said he did not believe in a two-state solution. And those of you who know about the conflict know many people want two states, some do not. And he said he did not. He was fine with it being one state. He was afraid if there was a two-state solution where Israel and Palestine officially separated and were essentially two different countries, that there would still be all of that animosity and hate, and there would still be all of the violence. So I said, well, then what would the solution be? And he said, just a leader who would let us have rights, which feels like not too much to ask for. And he pointed to some examples. He was fascinated by the leader of Singapore, who was able to bring people together and was really believed that it could happen if someone just allowed the Palestinians to have equal rights. And then I asked him, I said, do you ever think you'll see peace in your lifetime? And he said, no. Which is just devastating to hear. To hear what seems like such a simple solution. And again, we know it's not black and white. It may not be so simple, but to know that he didn't think, and he was a man of faith, he would work towards peace, but he didn't think it was going to happen in his lifetime. The other table is a different table, different home. This was when we were in Jerusalem. We were invited to share a meal with a Jewish family. This home was the second home of the couple who hosted us. It was very elaborate, very wealthy, high-rise apartment. The meal was not prepared by them, but brought in by caterers. You catch my drift. It was a different vibe there. And as our host began talking about Palestinians, he referred to them as terrorists. He only ever referred to them as terrorists, if he was referring to them as anything human at all. And he never referred to Palestine. He only referred to Samaria. And he said to us, well, there's nothing called Palestine in your Bible, is there? And we're kind of looking at him like, who are you? And he was very adamant that these were terrorists, that this was his right to his home. And again, it's not black and white. Let's not paint this man as just the evil one, because part of his story is that when he was driving with his young son about 30 years ago, they were shot at by Palestinians because there's ongoing war. He and his son both survived, but had significant injuries as a result. And that has most certainly colored his perception of what is going on. During a lecture during our time there, we heard from a speaker who brings together people of all faiths to talk about peace. And he told us that every person in Israel and Palestine is suffering some form of PTSD. Everyone either knows someone or is related to someone who was injured or killed by the other side. Everyone has been living with that for generations now. And so there's no clear right or wrong. And so it was really interesting to talk to this man and to have great sympathy for his story, but also to hear he was so adamant that these terrorists, as he said, were absolutely in the wrong. And he just kept saying, it's in the Bible, that Israel is our land, it's in the Bible. And so I raised my hand and I said, sir, and maybe I curtsied, I can't remember. I said, you're talking to a bunch of clergy women. We have had that phrase, it's in the Bible, thrown in our faces for our very existence of who we are in the world. So that's not going to fly so much with this group, because we know there are many interpretations. He bristled a little, and I said, so, let's put all of that aside. Whether it's biblical or not, there are people on this land. There are people, there are families, there are children. So what is your solution if there are people here, and you and your people who want to be here? What is the path to peace? And he just said, well, it's biblical. It's ours. They need to go. It didn't push the issue much further because I was a guest in his home and needed to get home that night, but it was very, very telling and very eye-opening to understand and see. And these were just two families. These represent just two stories out of millions and millions of points of view. And again, there's trauma on every side. And it's not a black and white. This was the seal on that trip that it is not a black and white issue. It is indeed a very complicated issue. And I think, especially for us as Christians who come to this place as pilgrims and who look to this place as the birthplace of our faith, to understand that it's not just what happened 2,000 years ago. It's not just about what Jesus did when Jesus was walking the streets of Capernaum and Jerusalem, but there are real life people living there now and living in conflict. And so understanding more of those perspectives and what can we do? I don't know. Pray, be advocates for peace, whatever peace looks like. And I think for me, ultimately, it was so important to hear the other side, or the many sides of the story, and know that there is no one side, that there is no right or wrong. But ultimately, that humanity is important. That sitting around the table calling the other a terrorist wasn't a way to win friends. But to hear that we just want to have rights was really important. We made it through 10 days in an hour, friends. You'll be hearing about this for years to come, so come back for more. But again, just thank you to each of you who made this possible for me. It was the trip of a lifetime, and if anyone wants to head back, I'm willing to go with you. So let's chat. We could get on a big bus and plane and all that. But just thank you for allowing me the privilege of being there and bringing this back to you. It is 12 noon now, so I know you gotta go and get your cheese dips and stuff. But if anyone has any questions or anything, I'm here for a while, so